I think that we have to find and develop a robust language of morality if we're going to organize to win. A language of morality, a language of ethics, a language of ought and should. And the reason I say that is because it's the greatest, I think it's the deepest longing among all of us, but I think among young people. How do I, the way I asked it at Monmouth, I began my talk by saying, how are you going to live your life so that it doesn't make a mockery of your values? How are you going to live your life? Now that's a question that was asked of me by Paul Potter when I was 20 years old. And it resonates for me still because it implies, A, that you can have values and that you can name them, and that then you can try to live your life in accordance with them. And I pulled out of my backpack, I'm like Dennis Kucinich, I carry shit around. And in this case, I'm carrying around for years the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And I read item 1. And item 1 is something that every college kid practically in America agrees with. It says basically that all human beings are valuable, that each human life is of incalculable value, and you can't put a number on it, and you can't, kind of make these distinctions. Every human being is worthy. And when you say that as a value, you realize that you have a lot to do to try to live up to it, and in some ways, you'll always fail. But it's a core American principle as well as a core ethical idea. We don't develop, we're not concerned enough about a language of values, and it leaves us weakened when we enter into the political landscape to discuss things like the war. The war is wrong, the war is immoral, and we have to argue, I think, on those terms, because I think it's true and because people are hungry for it. In other words, we have to go deeper than we typically do when we talk politics. I think that we have to organize, that all of us have to be organizing. And I don't think we should, and we can get into this discussion, I don't think we should mince or split on the question of this is the best thing to do, this is the least best thing to do. Things are worth doing. There's a lot to do. In a world that's so profoundly out of balance as this world, everybody can find something to do. And when my students hear me going crazy, they often say, well, I can't do everything. And my response is always the same. Can you do anything? If you can do anything, that's where it starts. And if you're doing anything, and you can link it up to anything else, that's the beginning of analysis. And so what I argue to my students and on these campuses that I speak at is that whatever else you do in the course of a week, you must go talk to people who don't agree with you. You must find a way in the dorm, in the neighborhood, somewhere. You have to knock on doors and talk, begin a conversation, open a public space. The public space is being eclipsed in every way that I can imagine today, more profoundly than ever. And it's always been. The public space is always a risky space. But the public space is in profound eclipse. And we need to find a way to open that public space. And a couple of kids at St. Ignatius deciding that they're going to take Little Italy, that neighborhood, and they're going to go talk to people about the war. Two things happen. It's a great pedagogical moment in the sense that you reach out and try to teach, but all pedagogical moments are also learning moments. And there's nothing more profound than to learn how to talk to people about their real concerns and their real lives, as opposed to slogans and getting everything in a meeting someplace and then going out and spouting it. It's conversation, it's dialogue that builds the public space. So organize, that's one method. Find a moral language, which I try to do in my own speaking, and then go out and organize. Connect the issues. And there's two kind of connections that I think we need. One is the issues that I mentioned, war and warming, scapegoating, and and the shredding of the Constitution and so on. Those kinds of connections. And one of the things you'll find, especially if you go out and organize, and we have to be unapologetic about, is we are in the majority on almost every issue that I care about. It's kind of bizarre. I live in Chicago. The city council agrees with me, and I'm coming back to Chicago, years after getting my head beat in and stuff years ago, and I'm like, how can the city council be anti-Patriot Act, anti-war, anti-nuke, pro-gay and lesbian rights. I mean, where did this come from? My city council is ahead of every politician running for president, every politician, right, except Ron Paul. We need to connect those issues. If I could have just 1 more minute, 2 more minutes. The other thing we need to do is we need to raise the question of participatory democracy so that when kids, for example, flood out of the University of Wisconsin, that we actually have, again, a list like I just read you. I could give you a list of 10 things that have hollowed out democracy in the last 2 decades. And democracy is always fragile. But for example, disenfranchisement. We should fight disenfranchisement. We should fight the Electoral College. We should fight for instant runoff. Do you all know what instant runoff is? We should fight for instant runoff. We should get money out of. Someday people are going to look, if any of us survive, look at this moment and say, you mean you had to have millions upon millions of dollars even to be a candidate? Yes. What do you call that democratic? People hate it. Why aren't we addressing those kind of core democratic issues that would fight for a more robust democracy? And then I agree with you. We have to act, and I want to add something in this dynamic. You have to act, and then you have to doubt, and then you have to act again. Without the doubt, we become dogmatic and sectarian, and I know a lot about this, and it's something that we have to resist. And the only way to resist it is to have the courage to act with your incomplete knowledge, your inadequate understanding, your contingent view of the world. Act on it, but be allowed to allow yourself to change from acting and rethink and reorganize and rework and then act again. But without the organizing, we're nowhere. So it's act, doubt, act, organize, raise up the moral question, connect the dots, and fight for participatory democracy. These, it seems to me, are the elements of movement building. Tom Hayden, you raised up Tom Hayden. I don't know if you saw his letter to Barack Obama, which I think is very important. Obama positioned himself as a centrist all the time and said, we can't have Tom Hayden Democrats and what's his name, non-Democrats. We have to find the middle. That's such a defeatist attitude. One of the things we should look at is that Howard Dean is known for screaming in Iowa and for being the internet money organizer. Howard Dean was the only anti-war candidate at that moment, the only one. Ron Paul has broken all records with internet fundraising. He's the anti-war candidate. What the hell is going on? Why can't we see it? You know, and so Obama says, we got to run down the middle. Hayden's letter to Obama is, you're out of your mind. The only way to win this election is to not fight over the stupid little white, upper middle class, wealthy male vote, but is to fight for an anti-war position that's coherent. People will come to that. So that's what I think we have to do.